Hey guys. So I wanted to do a quick little story time vlog today. Hopefully I will not get too long-winded and keep it short and to the point, but I wanted to tell you about how and why I went vegan. I actually just passed my 10-year vegan anniversary on the 1st. I went vegan on January 1st, 2010. So I was like 24 at the time. And prior to that, like probably since I was like 13, I had been vegetarian, like on and off, but I never really stuck with it. And I think it's because I never really fully did the research. It was kind of like an emotional decision where it was like sometimes I kind of don't feel good about eating meat, but other times, you know, when the people around me, like coworkers, family, ex-boyfriends, if you're watching this, you know who you are, bad influence, would be eating meat, and then I would just go along with what they were doing. And again, because I just hadn't fully done the research at that point, like I was very easily swayed. Like that's not something that would ever happen now, but at the time I was kind of a pushover. So sometime around 2008, 2009, I started thinking about like where food comes from. I know that was around the time like The Omnivore's Dilemma came out, which I never actually read that whole book. I know I have a copy of it somewhere. But I saw like Michael Pollan talking on probably Oprah or something like that. And also I remember Jamie Oliver, the chef, talking about these kind of things, like where does food come from? I remember him like talking about how chicken nuggets are made, and like if you actually knew how they were made, like you wouldn't want to eat them. It wasn't even a vegetarian or vegan based show, but he was just kind of like drawing attention to some of these things. And then middle of 2009, Jonathan Safran Foer was on Ellen, talking about his new book, Eating Animals. And I think he was on the show 2 or 3 times, like a few weeks apart. And I'll link those clips in the description below if you want to watch them yourself, like especially if you're not vegan or vegetarian or anything yet, but you're just kind of curious. I feel like it's a really good place to start. And a couple of my main takeaways from those shows were, first of all, I had not really considered what goes into eggs and dairy production. I just kind of thought, well, I don't want animals to be killed for my food, so I'm not going to eat meat. But I was totally oblivious to the fact that animals who are raised for eggs and dairy are also being killed. So if my goal is to prevent animals from being killed by my diet, continuing to eat eggs and dairy was not going to accomplish that. And if anything, you know, animals who are used for eggs and dairy are treated pretty poorly while they're being used for these products, and then they're killed in the end. So after this was explained to me, I kind of started thinking of eggs and dairy even being worse than meat. Some might disagree, but that was kind of my opinion at the time. I still kind of feel like that's true. And at this time in 2009, I was still fully eating meat, eggs, dairy, everything. So sometime around October, Jonathan Safran Foer was on Ellen again, and after watching that, I decided I needed to set a date. I was going to try being vegan for a year. And that seemed like a reasonable amount of time, like for me to learn how to be vegan, like not quit too early, because it's hard to actually stick it out and figure things out and see if it's something I can do long term. It also like made me feel like I didn't know how it was gonna go, you guys. I like kind of pictured myself at the end being like skinny and weak and frail and like malnourished. Like I didn't really know I had no idea. I didn't know anyone who was vegan at the time. Like I don't know, but I figured worst case scenario, like I was probably not gonna die like if I go vegan for a year. Like I imagine that it could be kind of terrible, but nothing that I couldn't handle, right? So I had about 3 months to kind of enjoy my favorite foods. At this time I kind of started cutting back my animal products though, and like I said, I started seeing eggs and dairy on the same playing field as meat. So for example, like if I would go to Chipotle, this might sound kind of weird, but like I would order, if I was in the mood to eat a steak bowl or something, I would get that, but then that would be the only animal product on my plate. And kind of like based on the limited information that I already had, I was kind of just starting to cut back on those animal products without really making a conscious decision about it. Like I just didn't really want them anymore. And I bought the book, Eating Animals. I bought it when it came out, but I decided that I wasn't going to even open it until January 1st because I had a good feeling that once I read it, I was never going to eat animal products again. Like I knew that once I learned these things, I wasn't going to be able to unlearn them, and I wasn't going to go back. Like I said in the past, like I had flip-flopped on being vegetarian. Like I knew that this was going to seal the deal for me. So basically whatever limited time I had to enjoy animal products, I wanted to enjoy it. I didn't want these facts to come in and spoil it for me. And that's exactly what happened. Like I started reading the book on January 1st. Around that time, I also became aware of Mercy for Animals, and they had like an undercover dairy investigation. And I will probably reread this book at some point this year and either make a video or post like a blog review or something about it. But one thing that I really liked about it, and one thing that I found was different from a lot of the animal welfare information that I had gotten in the past, mainly from places like PETA and the Humane Society, etc., was that like a lot of those other sources, the way the information was delivered just felt very like sensationalized, and it made me question whether it was legit or not. And now that I know what I know, of course it was true. Like I don't think any of the PETA investigations or anything that I had been kind of exposed to before were like not true. But it just, because it felt like they were trying to convince me of something, it like made me question whether they were being honest or not. And in contrast, this book I felt like was kind of the first resource that was just presenting the facts and letting me decide how to feel about it. It wasn't really telling me how I should feel or what I should do, and I really appreciated that. And I feel like that was one of the reasons it appealed to me. Like it just felt like he was just being honest. So a couple of other things that happened to me around this time that really sealed the deal for me were like 2 different stories about 2 different animals that kind of made me realize that farmed animals don't deserve to be overlooked. Let me just tell you the stories and then hopefully you'll know what I'm talking about. So in 2007, I started working in an animal hospital, and prior to that, I had very little exposure to cats. I was not a cat person. I know that might surprise you. I would even maybe say I didn't like cats. And so I showed up for my first day of work, and the person who was showing me what to do, the first task she gave me was she took me to the cat ward, which is like a row of cages filled with cats who are either there for boarding or hospitalization. And she said, okay, clean all of these cages. So you basically just take a cat out of the cage that they're in, move them to the next cage, clean the cage that they were in, move the next cat, etc., etc. So she told me to get started on that, and if any of the cats made me uncomfortable or if I didn't feel like I could handle them, come and get her and she would help me. So she left, and I kind of stood there and I looked at all these cats, and I thought about, you know, how to make my first move. And then I went and got her, and I'm like, I'm already uncomfortable. Like, I don't know what to do. And she's like, oh, you've never handled cats before? And I was like, nope. So she showed me how to do it. And, you know, I was a little bit nervous, but I got the hang of it. I mean, obviously. And, you know, the more I started to work with cats, the more I started to like them. I never really thought about this, but that was actually the day, my first day of work was the day that I met Pensone, because he and his brother had been surrendered to the hospital that I worked at, I guess. They were available for adoption. And Pensone actually had a little notation on his cage card. So we had a card on each cage, like identifying who was in there. And there was like a notation system for cats who might be a little bit feisty. And so Pensone had that on his card, like basically be careful handling this cat. And because he was in the hospital, you know, available for adoption, he was there for weeks, and every day that I would come in and see him and handle him, I would get a little more comfortable with him, he would get a little more comfortable with me. And I kind of started to realize, like, it wasn't that I didn't like cats, I just didn't understand them. I just didn't know them, you know? So maybe I'll tell the full story of how I adopted Pensone another time, but that is the relevant part to this video. So fast forward like 1.5 years or so, shortly after I went vegan, I went to Animal Acres, which is now Farm Sanctuary in Acton, California. It's like a little bit north of LA. Now that I was kind of becoming an animal advocate, I wanted to meet some of the animals I was advocating for so I could know what the heck I was talking about. So I went up there to volunteer, and I think the first job that I was given was to clean out the cow barns. And so, you know, they gave me a rake, they gave me like whatever supplies that I needed. And I was like, well, what do I do if the cows come? Because like I'd never been around cows before. I'd been around horses and they kind of scared me, but no experience with cows. But they told me, you know, they're out at pasture this time of day. They're out doing their cow thing. Like, they're probably not going to come back, so you don't really need to worry about it. And so I worked for a little while, like inside the little barn area. And then a cow came and poked his head in the door. And I was like, oh great, this is how I'm gonna die. Like, I don't know what he wants. Like, what? So I'm kind of trying to reassure myself at this point, like, okay, these sanctuary people, the person who gave me this job doesn't want anything to happen to me. Like, he wouldn't put me in harm's way. Like, he's not gonna send me in here if this is like a murderous cow. Like, he's not gonna put me in danger, right? So I try to play it cool and not react, not move, see what this cow is gonna do. And he kind of like starts to walk toward me, and I'm freaking out. My life is flashing before my eyes a little bit. And he just like walks up to me, like maybe this close, and stands there and doesn't do anything. So I figure I'm just gonna give this guy some space. So I move into the next barn over and think like maybe he'll just do what he wants to do in his barn and then he'll leave. And he followed me. And now we're in an even smaller area, which is probably about as long as his body, maybe a little bit longer. And I'm just in there in the corner, and he's in between me and the exit. So at this point, I figure it might be wise to befriend him, right? Like, that's my only shot at getting out of here. So I hold my hand out and I let him sniff it. And I kind of like slowly pet him. And I think he kind of moved out of the way, and then I made my way out into the bigger barn area where it was safe. But then he followed me. And I don't know why it took me this long to realize, but at that moment I was like, he just wants to be friends. Like, he just wants to hang out. Like, he's curious about what I'm doing. Like, he's never seen me before. He's like, hey, who are you? And so at this moment, it might have not been that exact moment, but sometime shortly after that moment, something clicked and I realized I didn't like cats, was afraid of cats before until I met one. I saw what they were about. I started to understand them, their body language, their noises they make. I mean, they're still kind of weird, but like once you know what they're about, you can kind of figure them out, right? And the same was true with this cow, which I don't know if I mentioned, but his name was Paolo, and he's still my favorite cow I've ever met. Like, he actually passed away last year, and I got to visit him a few months before that. Like, he was so sweet and so cute, and I'm really glad we got to have that moment together. But it made me realize, you know, the only reason we regard farmed animals as like having a lower status than, say, dogs and cats is because we don't have experience with them, we don't understand them, we don't know very much about them, we don't get to see their personalities. Like, I was totally unaware that if this giant cow was following me around like a puppy dog, like it could mean something similar to when an actual puppy dog follows you around like a puppy dog. Like, they just want to hang out. So I also got to work with some of the other animals at Farm Sanctuary. Cows and turkeys still are my favorite. Turkeys are very much like cats, in my opinion. They're a little bit shy at first, but once they get to know you, they want to be your buddy. When you pet them and like really find their spot, you know, they start purring. I'm not kidding. They make this sound that is very similar to a cat purring. Another cool thing about turkeys is that sometimes you can talk to them in turkey language and they will talk back to you. Which I've done before, but I'm not going to demonstrate it right now because without a turkey present, I feel like it would make me look a little weird. But I'll link another video in the description of a turkey at Farm Sanctuary with someone else, not with me, but it's a really cute video. But I tend to post this specific video like around Thanksgiving time because I want people to start thinking nice things about turkeys, and it's a really cute video. So yeah, I think that's about it about my vegan story. The last thing maybe I should mention is that at the time, I know I said this already, but I didn't know any other vegans. And like the vegan community on social media wasn't as huge as it is now. So I think another really important thing that I did at the time was start to look up other local events related to animal rights and veganism. So I think the very first event that I went to was the Animal Liberation Forum at Cal State Long Beach. It was organized by students, and I ended up meeting a lot of people there that I continued doing volunteer work and activism with, and that I'm like still friends with now. And then I went to the Let Live Animal Rights Conference, which was in Portland. I went with some of the people that I met actually at the first conference. This was actually kind of a surprise. This flyer fell out of the Eating Animals book and I didn't know it was in there. But I found some other artifacts too. There's like some stickers and stuff that I got from Herbivore in Portland. And then a newspaper article for a protest I went to while I was in Portland. This might have actually been the first protest I ever went to. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. But the first protest I went to was during this conference in Portland. Okay, anyway, that's enough of a walk down memory lane for one video, I think. But let me know if you have any questions or anything you want to know more about. And if you have any ideas for future videos that you would like me to make, I would love to hear them. All right, today is free Beyond Burger Day at Denny's, and I'm gonna go get me one. So I will see you guys in the next video.
I'm thinking you were made for me. Isn't it my birthday yet? Cause I gotta say, you're looking like a gift for me, wrapped up nice and neat, baby. Get in my way now, don't be shy. We'll be here dancing day and night. Get in my groove now, don't be shy. Cause I got this list of my favorite things. You could be the part where it all begins. You could be the first and the second and the third, then the rest of it.